Welcome to the Sci-Fi Alien channel. Today, we have a thrilling and intense story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. What if the galaxy's greatest threat wasn't gone after all? What if the Hegemony's shadow still looms, hidden deep within unexplored space? Stay tuned as we uncover humanity's greatest test yet. Is the past really behind us, or is it just waiting for the right moment to strike? When the first message from the Hegemony came, it wasn't loud or overt. It wasn't a declaration of war, but rather the cold, indifferent tone of bureaucratic orders, wrapped in a false veil of politeness. Your species, the message began, has been deemed unsuitable for intergalactic progression. The time has come for you to be removed from the galaxy's roster. The cold finality of it sent shivers through the halls of Earth's leadership, but there was something more insidious lurking in the silence that followed. For years, Earth had lived under the illusion of safety. The Hegemony's dominance had been well known, but humanity had always believed that their sheer will to survive would be enough. There had been warnings, of course, subtle shifts in galactic behavior, the increasing presence of alien ships in Earth's orbit, the whispered rumors of covert operations to control their resources. But no one had truly expected that extinction would be considered a valid option. As the news spread across the globe, it was met with a mixture of disbelief, confusion, and fear. However, among the whispers of despair, there was something else, a collective stirring. It wasn't a shout or a grand speech. It was the quiet murmur of millions of people all realizing, at the same time, that they weren't going down without a fight. And it wasn't the kind of fight anyone was expecting. In the quiet back rooms of Earth's top scientific institutions, engineers and scientists gathered. They weren't armed with weapons, but with something far more dangerous, a collective resolve. Humanity, ever resourceful, began to quietly activate long-dormant systems, defense grids disguised as energy reserves, technology embedded within civilian infrastructure, encrypted communication channels masked as harmless entertainment. Every small piece of what they had kept hidden from the Hegemony was slowly coming to life. It wasn't an accident. Earth had been preparing for this moment, though few had recognized it for what it was. For decades, humans had been living in a state of quiet vigilance, learning, adapting, and waiting. The world's leaders had met privately, far removed from the public eye, and discussed the impossible, the possibility that extinction wasn't just a concept, it was a real threat. But instead of succumbing to fear, they had decided on something more profound. They would not let themselves be extinguished. They would fight. Not just in battle, but with the very essence of what made humanity unique, its ability to adapt and outthink any adversary. The shift was subtle at first. It started with a few conversations among the world's leaders. A few, almost unnoticeable words, spoken in hushed tones. We're not just a species to be eradicated. The quiet meetings grew into urgent discussions. A few select voices, those who understood the weight of the situation, began to speak louder. We need to prepare for the unimaginable. If we fight, we do so with everything we've got. But the Hegemony, with all its arrogance and advanced technology, dismissed Earth as a primitive species with no true power. They'll bow to us as all lesser species do, said their chief xenologist, dismissing Earth's movements as nothing more than cultural agitation. Their resistance will be fleeting. It always is. The human response wasn't immediate violence. It wasn't even visible at first. Instead, it was a calm, steady building of power, one that would ultimately take the Hegemony completely off guard. Humanity had learned from the past. They had watched and adapted. It was not the strong arm of brute force they relied on, but the power of intellect and willpower. Human history, long seen as a series of wars and conflicts, was now transformed into a manual for survival, a blueprint for strategic resilience. Dr. Emily Harris, one of Earth's lead scientists, had been at the forefront of this quiet revolution. She and her team had developed technologies that the Hegemony had written off as impossible. As they sat in the war room one fateful evening, Dr. Harris looked up from her terminal, her face pale but set in determination. "If we're going to stop this, we need to make them see us," she said. "And not just as a species to be destroyed. We need to show them what happens when humans are pushed to the edge." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling in like a tangible force. No one spoke for a moment, but in their silence, they understood. They had been underestimated, but they would turn that underestimation into their greatest weapon. As the days wore on, humanity's response began to take shape. Hidden within the vast network of global communications, encrypted messages were sent out to all corners of the planet. These were not military codes, but carefully crafted signals designed to activate defense systems across the globe. The Hegemony had never suspected that the very infrastructure they had allowed Earth to build, thinking it would be harmless, was now Earth's secret weapon. The world's leaders issued a statement that would resonate across the galaxy: "We will not be exterminated. We choose to fight, not just for survival, but for our future, our dignity, and the freedom of all species." When the first wave of Hegemony ships entered Earth's atmosphere, expecting to see nothing more than panicked civilians and easy targets, they were greeted with an unexpected sight. Human cities were operating at full capacity, the streets bustling with life, while above them, new, never-before-seen ships began to take flight. Human ships, equipped with technologies that had long been kept under wraps. What the Hegemony had dismissed as mere curiosity and preparation had become the beating heart of Earth's defense. In the control rooms, humanity's top military strategists, who had long been preparing for this moment, spoke in calm, assured tones. "We've built this moment," General Carter said, as his fingers hovered over the activation panel. "Now, we show them what we're made of." The first strike was quick and precise. Earth's defense grid, which had been dormant for so long, flickered to life. Human ships, armed with weapons no one in the galaxy had ever seen, struck at the heart of the Hegemony's advanced fleet. It was not a victory through force alone, but through intelligence, preparation, and the unexpected strength of the human spirit. "Impossible," the chief xenologist had shouted, watching as the data streamed in. How could they? As their systems continued to fail, as the Hegemony watched helplessly, the humans did not relent. Their resilience wasn't just about fighting back, it was about the realization that the fight was about more than their survival. It was about their place in the universe. It was about claiming their right to exist, to be seen, to have a future. And as the Hegemony reeled from the blow they had never anticipated, Earth's leaders did not bask in victory. Instead, they began to plan the next step. "This," Dr. Harris said quietly, "is just the beginning." As the Hegemony's ships appeared on the edge of Earth's atmosphere, humanity's resilience was no longer a secret, it was a force in motion. The world had responded, yes, but now came the realization that they had been playing the long game. While the rest of the galaxy had underestimated the human race, thinking their lack of advanced technology made them vulnerable, humanity had spent decades quietly preparing, weaving an intricate web of defense so complex, it was invisible even to the most advanced surveillance systems. What the Hegemony didn't know, what they hadn't accounted for, was that Earth's greatest weapon wasn't found in its military might, it was in its ingenuity, its capacity for subversion, and its ability to turn their own expectations against them. General Carter, standing in the heart of the United Earth Defense Command, looked across the room at his team of top strategists. The hum of computers and the tense silence in the air felt like a storm gathering just below the surface. The hegemony was coming. And they had vastly underestimated what humanity was capable of. But they wouldn't be underestimating Earth for much longer. "We've always been a step ahead," General Carter murmured, eyes fixed on the holographic map of Earth's defenses. "They never saw this coming. And we've built it all on the foundation of their assumptions about us." His words lingered in the air. The room was filled with the quiet murmurs of recognition, the understanding that the time to reveal humanity's true strength had come. For years, Earth had been perceived as weak. Even their own people had been lulled into a false sense of security, believing that their greatest strength was in their ability to coexist peacefully, to advance technologically at a slow and steady pace. But what the hegemony failed to grasp was that Earth had been playing a much deeper game. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about strategic patience, about keeping their greatest capabilities hidden until the exact moment they would be needed. And that moment had arrived. The United Earth Defense Command had begun, years earlier, building a hidden infrastructure, a network designed to masquerade as civilian technology, energy grids, and communication systems. But in reality, these were the key elements of a global defense system that could be activated in an instant. The cities, sprawling across continents, had been designed with reinforced structures, power systems capable of supporting far more than civilian needs, and encrypted communication channels that had been fortified against even the most advanced alien surveillance. What they saw as simple technological advancement, we turned into something else entirely, Dr. Emily Harris said, her voice filled with quiet pride. She was one of the architects of Earth's strategic subterfuge, a scientist who had quietly worked with top engineers and military leaders to craft the systems that were now coming online. "We took their underestimation of us," Dr. Harris continued, pacing slowly across the room, "and we built a system that they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Their arrogance was our advantage." General Carter's gaze shifted to the holographic display before him. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. The hegemony had thought Earth's space stations, those seemingly primitive structures, were little more than research centers. They didn't know that beneath those surfaces were military-grade shields, defense systems, and weapons technology capable of defending against far more than just small asteroids. "That's what we've been doing all these years," Carter said, his voice steady. "We've been building, quietly. When they came to visit, we smiled, we nodded, we showed them our best behavior, but we were always preparing for this moment. Now, let's show them what we've really got." At that moment, the first human-made warships, designed in secrecy, slipped silently from their docking stations in orbit. They were not the sleek, fast ships the hegemony would have expected, but massive, robust vessels capable of holding more firepower than any galactic power had anticipated. The ships hummed with life as they powered up, their weapon systems synchronized and ready for deployment. The key was in the design. They weren't built to just defend, but to overwhelm. Earth had taken the time to understand every weakness of the hegemony's military systems, and now it was time to exploit them. On the ground, Earth cities remained calm. Traffic flowed. People went about their daily business. It seemed like any other day, except for the faint hum in the air, the hum of energy building, of hidden systems powering up. Across the globe, emergency channels were activated, and cities were readied for the incoming conflict. There was no chaos, no sense of panic. Humanity was ready. The world had transformed, from a species on the brink of extinction to a species with the power to alter the balance of the entire galaxy. We've trained for this, General Carter spoke softly to his staff, his voice carrying the weight of years of preparation. We knew this day would come. And now we use everything we've built. All the secrets we've kept, every plan we've laid, it's all coming to fruition. And as the Hegemony's fleet began its final approach, they were greeted not by a world in disarray, but by a planet that had transformed its entire infrastructure into an impenetrable fortress. As their ships moved closer, they saw Earth's greatest advantage, human ingenuity. They hadn't just built defenses. They had built a comprehensive network, one that could adapt and respond to any threat, using the same technologies the Hegemony had assumed were too primitive to matter. The first strike came from Earth's hidden space stations. In an instant, the Hegemony's most advanced targeting systems were jammed, their communications scrambled, and their sensors were overwhelmed by an electromagnetic pulse that had been hidden within Earth's infrastructure for years. How did they? The Hegemony's chief tactical officer was cut off mid-sentence as Earth's defense systems kicked into full gear. The surprise wasn't just that Earth had the technology to fight back. It was that humanity had anticipated this moment long before the Hegemony had even considered it. Earth didn't just have the capacity to defend itself, they had understood the vulnerabilities of their enemies better than the Hegemony could ever imagine. They don't even know what's coming, Dr. Harris said, her eyes alight with the thrill of watching humanity's strategy unfold. We've given them no chance to prepare for us. As the battle unfolded, it became clear that Earth's true weapon wasn't in the number of ships or the firepower. It was in the strategy itself. Humanity's greatest strength was not just in surviving, but in outthinking their enemies. The Hegemony, with all its technology, had never anticipated a species so meticulously prepared, so driven by the will to prevail against impossible odds. Earth's hidden capabilities were now fully revealed, and they were proving to be far more devastating than anyone had ever expected. The turning point wasn't the first battle, it was the realization that the Hegemony had been fighting an enemy that didn't exist in their perception of reality. They thought they were facing a helpless planet. What they were actually facing was the culmination of centuries of human resilience, creativity, and sheer determination to survive. This is just the beginning, General Carter said quietly, watching the first wave of Hegemony ships retreat in confusion. Now we show them who we really are. Earth had not only defended itself, it had flipped the script. The strategic revolution was not just about firepower, it was about rewriting the rules of engagement, proving that when pushed to the brink, humanity could turn its hidden capabilities into the most powerful weapon of all, their ability to adapt and overcome. The initial strikes had shattered the Hegemony's false confidence, but as their retreating ships sparked fires in Earth's skies, a deeper, more profound shift was underway. Earth's defense systems had been activated, and the world had proven itself capable of surviving the initial onslaught. But survival was not enough. Humanity wasn't just fighting to stay alive, they were fighting to reclaim their dignity, to defy the narrative that had been imposed upon them for centuries. As the first wave of Hegemony forces pulled back, the true power of Earth's counterattack began to take form. General Carter stood at the command center, his hands clenched into fists at his side, watching the holographic display of the battlefield. The map was dotted with the scattered remnants of the Hegemony's fleet, retreating into the vastness of space. He knew that this moment was bigger than just winning a battle. This was humanity's chance to reshape their destiny. This isn't just about fighting back anymore, Carter said, his voice low, but resolute. It's about taking back what's ours. It's about making sure they understand that we won't be their prey. We will never be their prey. Dr. Emily Harris, who had been working behind the scenes to orchestrate much of Earth's secret preparations, now stood next to him, looking at the data. "The hegemony may have underestimated us," she said, her eyes scanning the information on the terminal. "But now, we show them just how wrong they were. It's not just about superior technology anymore. It's about dignity. And that's something they'll never understand. The hegemony, with all their advanced weaponry and their centuries of dominance, had assumed that their might was undeniable. They believed that humanity, with its perceived primitive tools and fractured world, would crumble before their overwhelming power. But what the hegemony didn't anticipate was the indomitable strength of human spirit, the core of every person on Earth who had silently refused to accept their fate. The day the first strike hit had been the first time humanity had truly seen their own power. But what followed was something far more impactful, the transformation of human resolve into something far more tangible. The world wasn't just reacting to an attack anymore, they were rising up with a unified purpose. No longer would they be passive players in their own future. Back in the war rooms, the air was thick with determination. Earth's defense systems were more than just a reaction, they were a message. The first global broadcast was ready to air. The world's leaders, military commanders, and diplomats had all gathered in silence, awaiting the signal to go live. "Ready," Dr. Harris said, her fingers hovering over the final button. General Carter stepped forward, his face set in grim determination. "Let's make sure the hegemony understands this isn't a fight for survival, it's a fight for our right to exist on our terms." The broadcast began. Across the globe, screens flickered to life. The camera cut to General Carter, standing at the podium. Behind him, the calm and controlled hum of Earth's defense systems could be heard, a constant reminder of the power humanity had just unleashed. His voice rang out, clear and authoritative. "This is Earth," he began, his voice carrying the weight of the entire planet behind it. "We have fought for generations to be free. To live, to build, to dream. And today, we fight not for survival, but for our dignity. The hegemony thought they could eradicate us, thought they could wipe us from existence. They failed. Not because of weapons, not because of power, but because we are human." The words rippled through the air, carrying with them a surge of emotion that gripped everyone who heard them. On every continent, people felt their hearts swell with pride, their fear giving way to something stronger. It was no longer a fight for survival, it was a fight for everything they had ever believed in. "Today, we send a message," Carter continued, his voice growing stronger. "To the hegemony. To every species that would dare think us weak. We will not go quietly. We will not cower. The fight for our dignity has only just begun." The broadcast cut to scenes of Earth's cities coming to life in ways never seen before. The once quiet military facilities now hummed with activity as humanity's strength was broadcasted across the galaxy. Ships, powered by humanity's ingenuity, were launched into space, not as mere weapons of war, but as symbols of humanity's resilience. The hegemony's assumption that Earth would bend to their will was shattered in the faces of these determined warriors, equipped not just with advanced technology, but with the unshakable belief that they were entitled to defend their home. Back at the command center, the room buzzed with activity. "We've secured the next phase," Dr. Harris said, turning toward General Carter. "It's time for the hegemony to see what we've truly been preparing. This isn't just about military power, it's about how we outsmart them. How we turn their own arrogance into their greatest mistake." The team began coordinating the next phase of the counterattack. This time, the goal wasn't just to disable the hegemony's fleet, it was to paralyze them at their very core. With Earth's advanced technology now on full display, humanity started broadcasting encrypted data into hegemony-controlled space, scrambling their communications and causing chaos in their ranks. The once unbeatable forces of the hegemony found themselves at the mercy of the very species they had thought incapable of any true resistance. "Every move they make is predictable," said Captain Lewis, a veteran of Earth's new fleet, his fingers moving swiftly across the control panel. "We know what they'll do next. We've studied them, anticipated their every step. This isn't just about fighting back, it's about showing them that we've learned from every conflict in our history. Every failure has made us stronger." As the counterattack continued, the hegemony's command structure began to break down. Communication between their ships faltered, their military systems failed, and their once imposing fleet began to fall apart under the relentless assault of human ingenuity. For the first time, the hegemony wasn't the one dictating the terms of battle, they were being forced into a corner by a species they had always looked down upon. The hegemony's chief xenologist, once so confident in their superiority, now sat frozen at his desk, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Impossible," he muttered, staring at the screens before him. This cannot be happening. They were supposed to be weak. But it was happening. Earth, a planet once dismissed as an easy target, had proven to be far more than the hegemony could handle. They hadn't just fought back, they had turned the tables, reclaiming their dignity with every calculated move, every act of defiance, and every challenge to the hegemony's dominance. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were reclaiming everything that had ever been stolen from them, their right to exist, their right to be seen, and most of all, their right to define their own future. This wasn't a fight for survival. This was a fight for their freedom, their pride, and the legacy they would leave behind for generations to come. In every city across the planet, in every corner of space, humanity stood united, not just as survivors, but as victors. The hegemony had underestimated them once, and they would never make that mistake again. The battle had raged for days, and humanity had already proven itself capable of turning the tide. The hegemony, once certain of its superiority, found itself struggling to regain control. The surprise counterattacks, the sudden technological leaps, and the unwavering human resolve had left them reeling. Earth's forces had not only defended their home, they had redefined the terms of engagement, and now the moment of reckoning had arrived. Humanity had reached the threshold where survival no longer sufficed. They were no longer just defending, they were rebelling against an oppressive system that had long dominated the galaxy. They were rejecting the old order that sought to treat them as nothing more than a footnote in the vast, indifferent expanse of space. General Carter stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, the Eagle's resolve, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The latest wave of hegemony ships had fallen back, but he knew this wasn't the end. The battle was shifting, and the very fabric of the galaxy was about to be torn apart by a conflict not just between species, but between two fundamentally different visions of the future. "We've made them doubt us," Carter said, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of what was to come. "Now, we make them fear us." Dr. Harris, who had been by his side since the beginning of this campaign, didn't flinch. She had seen what humanity was capable of, sudden, brilliant bursts of strategy, but now it was time for something bigger. "It's not about fear anymore, General. It's about rewriting the rules. We can't just win. We have to make them recognize that this isn't just a fight. It's a new beginning. For the galaxy, for us." The events of the last few days had made one thing undeniable: the hegemony's vision of the galaxy was flawed. They had ruled through fear, destruction, and the belief that civilizations like Earth's were expendable. They saw themselves as the gatekeepers of progress, the arbiters of which species were worthy of survival and which would be wiped from existence. But now, as Earth's forces continued to push back, the idea of the hegemony as an unshakable empire began to unravel. General, Dr. Harris continued, her voice steady but tinged with urgency, we can't afford to just push them back into their corner. We need to overwhelm their entire system. If we don't act now, they will find a way to regroup. They'll reorganize and return with everything they have. Carter turned to the holographic map in front of him. The hegemony's forces were scattered, their communication channels disrupted, their fleets in disarray. But there was still a core of their strength, their central command, the heart of their empire. It was time to cut that heart out, once and for all. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore, Carter said, his voice hardening with resolve. We're fighting for every civilization they've oppressed, for every world they've crushed under their boot. We end this now. The plan was set into motion. But as the forces of Earth advanced, they did so not with the goal of sheer annihilation, but with purpose, to make the hegemony understand that their reign was over. Earth's forces would not destroy them in the traditional sense, they would render their entire system obsolete, outdated, and incapable of ever threatening anyone again. Is it time? Captain Lewis, one of Earth's military commanders, asked, his eyes scanning the terminal in front of him. Are we ready to strike? Yes, Carter answered, his gaze unwavering. We strike at their foundation. At their beliefs. We give them a choice they can't ignore. The strike wasn't a physical one. It wasn't a devastating assault on ships or planets, it was an intellectual blow, a message broadcast across the galaxy, not with weapons, but with truth. Earth's diplomats, scientists, and leaders had prepared a series of broadcasts, each more pointed and direct than the last. These were not broadcasts of aggression, but of empowerment, logic, and uncompromising reality. You can't keep the galaxy in chains forever, the first transmission began, the face of Earth's representative, a woman named Dr. Maria Cordero, staring into the hologram. Your empire is built on the destruction of cultures, the erasure of civilizations. You believed that you could decide who deserves to live and who should die. But the universe does not belong to you, hegemony. It belongs to those who fight for it, to those who defend their right to exist. We, too, have a place in this universe. And we will not be erased. The broadcast went live, piercing the vacuum of space and reaching the heart of the hegemony's central command. The message wasn't just a declaration of Earth's resistance, it was a declaration of change. Humanity was telling the galaxy, and the hegemony, that their time was over. The message struck like a hammer to the hegemony's foundational beliefs. They had long seen themselves as superior, as the protectors of order. They believed that the universe was theirs to control, and those who failed to meet their standards would be swept aside. But now, for the first time in their history, they faced a force that didn't accept their definition of order. The hegemony's leaders watched in stunned silence as Earth's broadcast continued. Their once immovable confidence faltered. The chief xenologist, who had spent countless cycles predicting humanity's eventual demise, stood frozen in disbelief. This is impossible, he whispered, his mandibles trembling. They're not just fighting back. They're changing the game. A ripple of panic spread through the ranks of the hegemony's leadership. The old order was crumbling, not just under the weight of humanity's military might, but under the weight of their very ideas being challenged. For centuries, they had held the galaxy in a grip of fear, manipulating and discarding entire species at will. Now, humanity had turned that fear into something they could no longer control, the desire for justice, for self-determination, and above all, the right to exist without oppression. "Tell the fleet to stand down," the High Chancellor of the Hegemony ordered, his voice shaking. "We cannot continue this. We have underestimated them. We have underestimated humanity." The first step in humanity's victory wasn't in the battle itself, it was in the realization that they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future where they controlled their own fate, where they weren't bound by the dictates of an empire that had long since abandoned justice for conquest. Earth had not just defended itself, they had reclaimed their dignity, their autonomy, and their place in the galaxy. This wasn't just a war of attrition, it was a revolution. And in that revolution, humanity would no longer allow itself to be subjugated. As Earth's forces pressed forward, the galaxy began to take notice. The old order, once unassailable, was now under siege. And in the silence of space, one truth became clear to all: the hegemony was no longer the center of the universe. Humanity was. The moment the hegemony faltered, when their fleets retreated and their leaders stood in stunned disbelief at the defiance humanity had shown, something deep and irreversible began to shift in the galaxy. It wasn't just a victory for Earth, it was the dawning of a new age, an age in which the old, oppressive order was dismantled and a new future was built on the ideals of equality, justice, and shared prosperity. Humanity had spent centuries under the shadow of empires like the hegemony, taught to believe that they were insignificant, that their struggles were meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe. But the fight for their dignity had revealed a power within them, a collective will to create, to transform, and to build a future that would no longer be dominated by fear and violence. Now, as Earth's forces pressed forward and the last remnants of hegemony influence crumbled, humanity understood something vital: they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to create a new reality for the entire galaxy. "We've done it," Dr. Emily Harris said, standing beside General Carter on the bridge of the flagship Eagle's Resolve. "We've broken the chain. The old system is dead. But what comes next? We can't just leave a void." Carter looked out at the stars, his gaze filled with a quiet, determined strength. The battle had been fierce, but they had won. The galaxy was no longer a place ruled by fear, but a canvas awaiting the touch of those who dared to rebuild. "What comes next," he replied, his voice steady, "is a galaxy that's finally free." As the final ships of the hegemony were scattered, their once proud fleets now in disarray, the world and its leaders began to shift their focus. No longer were they preparing for the next conflict, they were laying the foundations for something that had never existed before: a truly united galaxy. The first step was to reach out to those species who had long been oppressed, those who had lived in the shadow of the hegemony's power. Earth's diplomats began to broadcast messages of peace, offering support and cooperation to any who sought it. "We can't just destroy," General Carter said to his council, his tone reflecting the magnitude of what lay ahead. "We need to rebuild. Everyone must have a seat at the table." Dr. Harris nodded. The hegemony was only one part of the problem. Their system of dominance was rooted in the idea that only the strongest deserved to thrive. But the truth is, we're all part of this universe together. If we don't create something that benefits everyone, we'll just repeat the same mistakes. The broadcasts that Earth sent out were met with mixed reactions. For some, the idea of cooperation with humanity was still anathema. Centuries of fear, of seeing Earth as nothing more than a resource to be harvested or a world to be wiped out, couldn't be erased overnight. But there were those who saw this moment for what it was: an opportunity for a fresh start. A chance to reject the old, brutal order and embrace something more equitable, something more inclusive. Among those who responded were leaders from several oppressed worlds, worlds that had been forced into submission by the hegemony, whose cultures had been erased or subjugated. One such leader, Thakar of the Talai, a species known for their resourceful engineering and deep connection to the natural world, was one of the first to publicly support Earth's vision. I have watched my people suffer for centuries under the hegemony's control, Thakar said in a broadcast to Earth. Now, it is time for us to choose a different path. One that honors our traditions, our cultures, and our future. We stand with you. That message, simple yet profound, sent ripples across the galaxy. It was a powerful symbol. The oppressed were rising, not with weapons, but with hope. The hegemony had believed that the galaxy could only be ruled through strength. But humanity had shown that the real strength lay in the willingness to build something better, to construct a future that embraced diversity, that celebrated each species for what it could offer to the larger whole. We're not just conquering, General Carter said, addressing the Council of Earth's leaders. We're rebuilding. We've won the right to exist on our own terms. Now it's time to make sure everyone else has that same right. The next few months saw a rapid shift in the balance of power. Earth, once considered the weakest link in the galaxy, became the center of a new galactic council, one founded on the principles of cooperation and mutual respect. Delegates from worlds that had once been at war with one another now sat side by side, drafting new laws, creating shared resources, and designing a new order, one where the survival of the fittest was no longer the law of the land. We're writing the rules of the new galaxy, Dr. Harris said to Carter one evening, as they watched a new set of alliances form on the holographic display. We're not just fixing what's broken, we're designing something that's never existed before. General Carter leaned forward, his eyes sharp. And we're not just doing this for us. We're doing this for everyone who's ever been crushed under the weight of the old system. The hegemony may have thought they could eliminate us, but what they didn't realize is that they were setting the stage for something far more dangerous, a new way of thinking. A new way of governing. The new Galactic Council, with Earth at its helm, began creating policies that promoted equality, sustainability, and protection for all species, regardless of their size, power, or history. Where once the hegemony had crushed and erased the cultures of others, Earth, and its allies now sought to preserve and celebrate the diversity that had always been at the heart of the galaxy. The galaxy, once divided by power struggles and genocide, now began to weave itself into a tapestry of unity. We have a responsibility, Dr. Harris remarked during a meeting, her eyes scanning the diverse representatives gathered around the table. To make sure that every species, every culture, has the chance to thrive. We can't let this new system become another form of control. We need to ensure freedom is at the center of everything. The new order was not without its challenges. There were still those who clung to the old ways, those who believed in the supremacy of certain species over others. But the momentum for change was unstoppable. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do when backed into a corner, and now they were witnessing the emergence of something entirely new, a system where the fate of all species was intertwined, and no one would ever again have the power to decide who deserved to live and who deserved to die. We're not just creating a new government, General Carter said in his final address to the Council. We're creating a legacy that says, we choose cooperation over conquest, justice over power, and peace over war. This is the future we are building. And it's a future where every voice matters. Humanity had rejected the old order, and in doing so, they had begun the galactic revolution that would define the future. It was a revolution not of arms, but of ideas, of freedom, cooperation, and hope. The galaxy had been reborn, and humanity stood at the forefront of this new era. The galaxy had just witnessed a revolution. The hegemony, once the dominant power, had crumbled under the weight of humanity's resilience and determination. Yet, as Earth and its allies celebrated their hard-earned victory, they understood that the real test was still ahead. The galaxy had been reshaped, but the challenge of rebuilding it, the challenge of sustaining peace, creating equity, and ensuring freedom for all, had only just begun. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they could fight and win. But now, as they stood at the precipice of a new era, the real question was not about how they fought, but about how they would lead. The way forward was no longer defined by the tactics of war, but by the very essence of what made humanity unique: empathy and innovation. I think we've learned something about ourselves, haven't we? Dr. Emily Harris said, sitting across from General Carter in the newly established council hall. The holographic images of the galaxy swirled around them as Earth's leaders, along with representatives from other species, began to assemble. It wasn't just our military capabilities that made the difference, was it? Carter nodded, his gaze distant as he surveyed the council hall. No, it wasn't. The truth is, what we've been fighting for was never just survival. It was about creating something different, something that would show the rest of the galaxy that there was more than just power. There was a way of thinking that could change everything. The victory over the hegemony was only the beginning, and Earth's leaders knew that the true power of this new order lay in their ability to build a future where empathy was just as important as strength, and innovation was used not to dominate, but to uplift. Humanity had spent centuries focusing on survival, often through conflict, but the rise of a new galaxy had revealed that their most significant asset wasn't just their technological advances or their military ingenuity, it was their ability to understand and to care for the well-being of others, even those who had once been their enemies. Empathy is a weapon, Dr. Harris continued, her voice filled with quiet passion. It's one we've had all along, and it's what makes us different from the hegemony. They didn't care for the species they conquered. They didn't listen to the needs of others. But we listen. Her words echoed through the room. The other representatives, some from once oppressed species and others who had once been distant onlookers, nodded in agreement. They had seen the effects of this empathy firsthand. Where the hegemony's rule had been one of fear and suppression, Earth's leadership had been grounded in listening, in understanding the challenges faced by each species, and using their resources to help, rather than exploit. I think that's why the galaxy is beginning to trust us, General Carter replied, his voice firm but tinged with a quiet hope. We're not here to rule. We're here to share. We're here to create something that will give every species a chance to thrive, no matter where they come from or what their past is. The transformation was evident. The humans had shown that, despite their past struggles, they could rise above the brutality of their former oppressors. They didn't just dismantle the hegemony's military systems, they also reached out with support and innovation. Rather than hoarding their newfound knowledge and technology, they began sharing it with those who had long been denied it. Across the galaxy, Earth's innovation became a symbol of hope. Energy grids, once monopolized by the hegemony, were now shared freely. Medical breakthroughs, once confined to the most powerful empires, were now available to all. Earth scientists and engineers worked hand in hand with species who had once been their enemies, helping them develop sustainable resources, advanced technology, and new ways of living in harmony with the galaxy. This is what makes us unique, Dr. Harris said, turning back to Carter. We don't just build machines and weapons. We build communities. We build futures. And in doing so, we create a legacy that isn't about defeating our enemies, it's about helping them stand alongside us. There was a quiet understanding in the room. The galaxy was not yet healed. The wounds of centuries of oppression, conflict, and war still ran deep. But as humanity's leaders had shown, the path to healing wasn't through force, it was through collaboration, shared purpose, and the simple but powerful act of reaching out to others, even when it seemed like the easier path would be to strike first, to dominate. Then let's make it happen, Carter said, his voice growing resolute. This isn't just about being leaders. It's about being examples. We need to show the galaxy that it's possible to live differently. It's possible to build a future that's better than what came before. But we have to be willing to listen, to change, and to always innovate for the benefit of all. As the days passed, humanity and its allies began working together to form a new galactic framework, a system built not on control, but on the shared values of respect, understanding, and cooperation. The new Galactic Council, where every species had a voice, was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It wasn't just about negotiating power, it was about negotiating peace, ensuring that each species could thrive according to its own culture, while contributing to the larger whole. In this new era, innovation became the key to liberation. The inventions of Earth's engineers were not just tools of war, they were tools for progress. Artificial intelligence systems, once feared for their potential to enslave, were now used to monitor and protect endangered species, manage planetary ecosystems, and even mediate diplomatic conversations between species. But perhaps the most profound shift of all was in the way humanity began to view itself. Where once they had been a species divided by history, by resources, by war, they now stood united not by the force of their weapons, but by their ability to care for each other. Their greatest asset wasn't their technology or their military power, it was their compassion and their ability to innovate for the greater good. This is the real victory, Dr. Harris said one evening, as she watched a group of intergalactic diplomats working together in harmony. Not the destruction of the hegemony, not the defeat of our enemies. It's the creation of a future where all voices are heard. Where no one is left behind. This is the legacy we're building. As Earth's influence grew across the galaxy, this was the message they spread, a message that resonated with every species that had ever been silenced, every civilization that had ever been crushed under the weight of oppression. Humanity had shown the galaxy that the future was not for the strongest to rule, but for the kindest to lead, for those who could listen, care, and, most importantly, build a future together. In this new galaxy, it wasn't enough to simply survive. It was about thriving, together. And in this galaxy, the human spirit, through its unmatched empathy and boundless innovation, became the guiding force that led them all toward a brighter, more unified future. As the final embers of the old order flickered out and the hegemony's once great empire crumbled, a new reality began to take shape in the galaxy. Earth, once a quiet planet in the far reaches of space, had risen from the ashes of oppression. No longer fighting merely for survival, humanity had carved out a future not through brute force, but through wisdom, empathy, and a vision of cooperation that was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had shown the galaxy the power of unity over domination, of collaboration over conquest. Humanity's leadership was no longer just about military might or strategic genius. It was about something more profound, something that would guide the galaxy into this new era. It was about the willingness to lead by example, to build a galaxy where every species could thrive, and where differences were not just tolerated but celebrated. General Carter stood before the newly formed council in the heart of Earth's capital, his eyes scanning the diverse faces of the species gathered. The seats were filled not only with humans but with representatives from planets once under the boot of the Hegemony's rule. Their faces reflected a mix of awe, uncertainty, and, perhaps, hope, a hope that had long been absent from the galaxy. Carter's hands rested firmly on the podium in front of him as the hum of nervous energy filled the room. He had fought for this moment, led his people through the crucible of war and conflict, but today, the battle was different. This was the beginning of something new. This council, this galaxy we are beginning to rebuild, is not about us, Carter said, his voice echoing through the chamber. It's about what we leave behind. We are here today, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Not as rulers, but as leaders, who will guide the future by the light of what is just, fair, and right. We've learned the hard way what happens when one species tries to impose its will on others. That ends today. Dr. Emily Harris, standing at his side, nodded quietly. She had witnessed the journey from Earth's vulnerability to its current position of power, and the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. We've been given the rare opportunity to redefine the future of this galaxy, she added, her voice steady and filled with conviction. The leadership we provide must not be rooted in fear, but in the belief that we are all interconnected, that our strength lies in our diversity, in our willingness to come together and build a future that protects every living being. The council chamber was quiet for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air. The delegates from once oppressed worlds, the Talai, the Quarren, and others, listened intently. They had all been part of the resistance, part of the growing movement that had toppled the hegemony. Yet, the true challenge lay ahead. How would they move forward together? Would the scars of centuries of oppression linger, or would they be able to move past old grudges and embrace a new era of collaboration? A new era, Carter repeated, as if weighing the gravity of the phrase. One where no species will ever again be cast aside, left to suffer under the rule of a tyrant. We have the chance to lead in a way the galaxy has never seen before. Through empathy and innovation, we will rebuild. But as Earth's leaders spoke of these lofty ideals, the reality of the task ahead was far from abstract. To build this new future, humanity would have to put its words into action. They couldn't simply dismantle the hegemony's systems and walk away. They had to create something from the ground up, a new system, a new order where justice wasn't negotiable, where each voice was valued, no matter how small. A delegate from the Quarren, a species long subjugated by the hegemony, rose from his seat. His skin shimmered with the silver hues of his species, his voice firm and measured. You ask us to believe in this new future, he began, his eyes locking with Carter's, but how do we move forward when so much of our history has been written in blood and betrayal? Can we truly trust that this council will not become another form of control? How do we know we won't fall into the same patterns again? There was a murmur of agreement from others in the room, and Carter, understanding the weight of the question, took a deep breath before responding. You have every right to question us, he said, his voice soft yet unwavering. We don't expect trust to come easily. We've seen the consequences of unchecked power, and we know the cost of betrayal. But I can tell you this, we will not repeat the mistakes of the past. This council is not about maintaining power, it's about sharing it. We are all here because we have seen what happens when one group holds control over another. We will not do that to anyone. Dr. Harris stepped forward, her expression reflecting a quiet determination. We've worked hard to design this system so that no one species, no one voice, can dominate. It's not about creating a new empire. It's about building a galaxy where every world can contribute, where every species has a stake in the future. We've seen what happens when we divide ourselves, and we've seen how powerful we can be when we unite. This council will be different because it will be based on fairness, on transparency, on cooperation. And we will lead with those values at the heart of everything we do. The room fell into a deep silence. For the first time, the delegates saw that humanity wasn't just offering words, they were offering a plan, a tangible vision for how the future could be different. Earth, having emerged from a history of division and conflict, was leading the galaxy not with fear, but with a commitment to healing, to building, to ensuring that all species, no matter their size or power, would have a place in this new world. The tension in the room began to ease, and slowly, one by one, delegates from the Taili, the Quarren, and other species began to speak. They were skeptical, yes, but they were also intrigued by the possibility of a future where they could finally have a seat at the table. They understood that this wasn't going to be easy, that the scars of the past couldn't be healed overnight. But they also saw something new in the humans, the possibility of change. One of the Taili representatives, a young woman with sharp, perceptive eyes, spoke up. If you truly believe that this council can be the beginning of a new era, then we stand with you. We will work together. But know this, we will hold each other accountable. We will not let the mistakes of the past be repeated. We will demand that this system work for everyone. Not just for Earth. Not just for the strong. But for all of us. Her words resonated deeply with the assembly. The new order was not going to be perfect, nor would it be easy. But it was a starting point. And that was something that had been sorely missing from the galaxy for far too long. General Carter met her gaze and nodded. This is a new beginning for all of us. We will hold ourselves to the highest standards, and we will work tirelessly to build a future where every voice is heard and every life is valued. And so, under the leadership of Earth, the new era began. The galaxy was no longer governed by a single empire, no longer ruled by fear and destruction. Instead, it was led by a collective, a community of worlds bound by the shared commitment to justice, to peace, and to each other. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and humanity was at the heart of it, not as conquerors, but as the leaders who would guide the galaxy into a future where all could thrive. The council had been established, the old order was torn down, and humanity stood at the precipice of something extraordinary. But the real work, the work that would define the future, had only just begun. In the wake of the victory over the Hegemony, General Carter, Dr. Emily Harris, and the leaders of Earth knew that the galaxy had entered a new chapter. But this chapter wasn't about their triumph, it was about what they would do with the opportunity they had fought for. The new galactic system they had created wasn't perfect, it couldn't be. It was still fragile, still in the process of being built, and for the first time in a long while, there was an overwhelming sense of responsibility that weighed on the shoulders of humanity's leaders. They had won the war, yes, but now they had to win the peace, and that was a far more challenging task. As Carter stood before the newly formed Intergalactic Council, he felt the weight of the moment. The seats in the hall were filled with delegates from countless species, all of whom had come together to reshape the galaxy. The once impossible dream of a united galaxy, where justice and equality were the cornerstones of governance, was now within their grasp. But that dream was fragile. One wrong step, one miscalculation, could unravel everything. And humanity was the beacon of hope, the symbol of this new way of thinking. We've won, Carter said, his voice calm but heavy with responsibility. But our work has just begun. It's not enough to have defeated the hegemony. It's not enough to have freed ourselves from their grasp. What matters now is what we do with that freedom. The future we build will be our legacy. Dr. Harris, standing next to him, looked out over the assembly, her eyes sharp and determined. The future we build is not just for humanity. It's for everyone in this galaxy. We've seen the devastation caused by those who believed that power should come from domination. Now it's time to show them that real power comes from unity, from shared purpose. The delegates listened closely, their eyes flicking between the two humans, their faces marked with a mixture of hope and skepticism. The victory was still fresh, but the galaxy had seen many alliances crumble after a great conflict. The true test of this new order would be whether it could endure the pressures of time, politics, and the inevitable challenges that would arise. We've done something unprecedented, Dr. Harris continued, her voice gaining strength. But the galaxy is vast, and we are just beginning to understand the depth of the work that lies ahead. We've created a foundation based on empathy, innovation, and cooperation, but we cannot afford to be complacent. We must build, not just for ourselves, but for the countless species who've been left in the dark for too long. It's our responsibility to ensure they don't slip back into the shadows of oppression. The words resonated in the council hall, and for the first time, the tension in the air shifted. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's potential for rebellion, for innovation, and now, they would see humanity's true capacity for compassion and leadership. But the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There were species who had long been victims of the hegemony, some who harbored deep distrust, and others who had been taught that power must be seized, not shared. Look at what we've achieved so far, Carter said, his voice steady. But now, we have to prove that our victory was not just a moment of defiance, but the beginning of a movement. A movement where every voice is heard, where every species has a chance to thrive, and where no one is left behind. If we are to honor the legacy of this victory, we must build not just a system of governance, but a system of solidarity. The room fell into a reflective silence, the weight of their collective responsibility settling in. The vision of a galaxy governed by mutual respect was alive, but it would require more than just diplomacy and treaties, it would require a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed itself. No longer would strength and fear be the tools of leadership. Now, leadership would be defined by understanding and compassion. One delegate, a member of the Taili species, stood up, his silver skin shimmering under the lights. His voice was measured, but there was a quiet fire in his words. "You speak of a united galaxy," he said, his eyes meeting Carter's. "But you must understand, we have been oppressed for so long. We have learned to survive, not to trust. Your victory was one of great significance, but the wounds of our past will not heal overnight." Carter nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. "I understand," he said softly. "We understand. The road ahead will be difficult. Trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned, one step at a time. And that's exactly what we will do. We will earn it." Dr. Harris added, "It's not just about treaties and agreements. It's about actions. We must show the galaxy that this new era isn't about imposing one way of life on others. It's about listening, it's about learning, and most importantly, it's about growing together." The Taili delegate nodded, his expression softening. "Then we move forward together. For the first time, we have the opportunity to change everything." General Carter looked around the room, his gaze sweeping over the delegates. He saw the weariness in their eyes, the hesitation. But he also saw something else, hope. The hope that had been stifled for so long was beginning to take root. It was fragile, still in its infancy, but it was there. Humanity had led the charge to topple an empire, but now they had to lead in the quiet work of reconstruction, in the careful task of building trust and creating a galaxy where every species could find their place in the stars. "This is not a task we will take lightly," Carter said, his voice low but resolute. "We will build this future together. And that means working tirelessly to ensure that no one is left behind, that no one is forgotten. We've been given a rare opportunity to create something beautiful here, and we won't waste it." Dr. Harris smiled slightly, her voice filled with quiet optimism. "The road ahead is long, but we have already taken the first steps. And that's more than most species ever get." The council hall buzzed with murmurs of agreement. For the first time, the galaxy was united, not by fear or conquest, but by the shared belief that a better future was possible. Humanity had shown the way, but the true test of their legacy would come not in their words, but in their actions. They had set the foundation for a new era, now it was time to build that future, together. Side story. The galaxy had just begun to settle into the new order. Earth, with its hard-won victory, had started to rebuild, working hand-in-hand with former enemies and allies alike. General Carter stood before the newly formed Intergalactic Council, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction as he watched species once oppressed by the Hegemony begin to find their place in the new world. For the first time, the stars felt different, brighter, more accessible, more hopeful. Yet, deep within the recesses of his mind, a nagging thought lingered. No peace, no matter how hard won, is ever truly permanent. The council was abuzz with activity. Dr. Harris was overseeing the final stages of rebuilding Earth's interstellar communication systems, and the Taili, who had long been silenced by the Hegemony, were finally sharing their scientific advancements with the rest of the galaxy. But even in this era of cooperation, the weight of past trauma was still visible in some of the delegates' eyes. The question of whether true unity could ever exist in a galaxy so scarred was still unanswered. But the unexpected was waiting. As Carter sat in the council chambers, overseeing the final agreements on new resource-sharing laws, a sudden alert flashed across the hollow screen in front of him. It was unusual, almost undetectable at first. A soft ping, followed by a rapidly increasing pattern of signals. Carter's brow furrowed as he scanned the incoming message. A deep, unknown encryption, it wasn't from any of their known allies. This signal came from beyond the known galaxy, a region that had been unexplored, untouched since the end of the Hegemony's reign. "What is this?" Carter muttered to himself, leaning closer to the screen. Dr. Harris, who was standing beside him, turned quickly. "That's impossible. No one's been able to access that frequency for centuries. It's not even registered in any of our systems. Where did it come from?" Before Carter could respond, the lights in the council room flickered. The atmosphere shifted. The hum of activity in the room seemed to pause, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. "General," Dr. Harris said, her voice suddenly sharp with concern. This isn't a standard transmission. It's a call for help. But it's coded in Hegemony encryption." The room fell silent. The Hegemony had fallen. Everyone knew that. But now, this mysterious signal was calling out from deep within the galaxy, where no human or known ally had ever traveled. Carter's instincts kicked in, and his fingers flew over the control panel in front of him. "Activate the long-range sensors," he ordered. "We need to track this down. Now." Within seconds, the room's holographic display was flooded with images of the distant sector, the region where the signal had originated. There was something there, something that didn't make sense. A massive structure, a remnant from the hegemony, hidden and dormant for centuries. But it was alive. "The transmission is coming from there," Dr. Harris said, her voice trembling. It's a station. But it wasn't on any map. How did we miss this?" General Carter's mind raced. He could feel the unease spreading through the room. It doesn't make sense. The hegemony's main forces are gone. What could still be out there, buried so deep? A voice suddenly echoed from the entrance of the chamber. It was Commander Lewis, his face pale, his uniform disheveled. He looked as if he had been running for hours. "Sir, there's something you need to see." "What is it, Commander?" Carter asked, already knowing that whatever he was about to hear wouldn't be good. "It's the station," Lewis said, pointing to the live feed on the screen. "The signal, it's sending out waves of energy. We're detecting unusual patterns. It's not just a transmission, it's a distress beacon, but it's also sending signals to an unknown location. It's like it's awakening." "Awakening?" Carter repeated, his pulse quickening. "Are you saying something there is still active?" "Yes, sir," Lewis replied, glancing at the screen again. "And the energy readings, they don't match anything we've seen before. It's like the station is calling to something, or someone, beyond our reach." A cold silence swept the room. Dr. Harris turned to Carter, her face tight with worry. This could be a trap. The hegemony may have left behind more than just their military forces. What if this is a last-ditch effort to regain control of the galaxy? The implications of her words were chilling. If the hegemony had secretly left behind powerful technology, dormant but not destroyed, it could mean more than just another battle. It could mean the galaxy had never truly rid itself of the threat they had fought so hard to escape. "Prepare a fleet," Carter ordered, his voice resolute but filled with a new urgency. "We'll take every precaution, but we need to investigate this. Whatever it is, it could have been waiting for centuries to be uncovered. If it's hegemony technology, we can't afford to ignore it." "Not now." But before they could move further, another notification flashed on the screen. A new transmission, this time from a fleet they did not recognize. The signal was unmistakable, it was a military command. A command in hegemony code. Dr. Harris's voice quivered. "There's more. It's not just a distress call. Someone is still using hegemony forces. Someone is out there, and they're activating their fleets." The galaxy, now rebuilt and fragile, had just encountered a new, uncharted danger. A force, hidden for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. The victory they had fought for had just become the beginning of another war, one that threatened to pull humanity back into the depths of galactic conflict. Carter turned to the council. His jaw clenched, his hand gripping the edge of the table. "We thought we had won," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of their collective efforts. "But the fight is far from over. We need to act, before the past comes back to claim us." As the delegates murmured in fear, Carter looked out into the stars, his mind racing with the gravity of what they now faced. The galaxy was not safe, not yet. And this new force, waiting in the shadows, would test everything they had worked so hard to build. This wasn't just about defending Earth anymore. This was about defending the future.